All right, hi everyone. We might kick things off. My name is Madison, and I'm a researcher at the Northern Territory Department of Primary Industries and Resources, and I will host today's webinar. We've got a special guest today to present on melon food safety, Dr. S.P. Singh from the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries. And this is our third webinar in our 10 webinar series, NT Ag webinar series. So thanks again for joining in. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please place them in the chat box. You can launch it on your screen if it's not on your screen. You can launch it by hovering over the buttons below down the bottom, and open the chat box. And then at the end of Dr. SP's webinar, our presentation, I'll go through the questions. Okay, all right. I'll hand over to Dr. SP.
Thanks, Madison. First of all, I would like to thank the Northern Territory Department of Primary Industries and Resources for inviting me to the webinar series. In today's webinar, I'm going to talk about melon food safety. As we know, microbial contamination, especially for rock melons and honeydews, is a great challenge for the melon industry worldwide. Bacterial pathogens such as Salmonella and Listeria monocytogenes, they can contaminate the melons and cause foodborne illness outbreaks, impacting the consumers, government, and industry alike. So to support the Australian melon industry, the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries initiated a Safe Melons program in 2015 with the aim to develop a strong food safety culture in the industry across the supply chain. This program is aimed to provide scientific evidence-based best practice to all the supply chain participants so that microbial food safety risks could be managed in a better way. So this initiative is national in scope, so we are covering all the melon growing regions in the country and actively engaging with key supply chain participants, starting from melon growers, packers, retailers, and to some extent, even exporters and importers. So the program has good support from the Australian Melon Association, which is the peak industry body of melon growers, and is funded currently by Hort Innovation using melon growers R&D levy and the matching contributions from the Australian government. So today's webinar is part of the current project, which is food safety training, extension, and capacity for the melon industry. It's in the phase 2, where we are aiming to strengthen the melon food safety systems across the supply chain through adoption of best practice. So melon food safety, our Safe Melon program is founded or based on a combination of 3 types of control measures: preventative controls, detective controls, and corrective controls. So in preventative controls, we educate and train the growers to follow best practice and good hygiene in the field, pack houses, and for workers. While detective controls, where we are running a melon food safety surveillance program by regularly collecting the samples of fruits and other environmental samples from throughout the supply chain. We also encourage the growers and packers to regularly conduct microbiological testing of the irrigation water, post-harvest water, fruit, and the pack house environment. So the detective controls help us to keep a pulse on where the industry is heading or the potential of a threat or a food safety failure. In terms of corrective controls, these control measures are mainly to mitigate the impact of a food safety incident if it occurs. So we are recommending to the growers and packers to have a good product recall plan and crisis management plan and reverse traceability system so as to respond if any incident occurs. In my presentation, I'll briefly talk about the potential food safety hazards in the field and post-harvest systems, but I'll mainly focus on the best practice adoption, how to manage these risks. We know that contamination can occur anywhere along the supply chain, but the highest probability of contamination is in the field. All melon types are grown in the open field production systems. Therefore, the food safety hazards and the risks during pre-harvest stage are common for all types of melons. However, there's some variation in the way they are handled at post-harvest stage. For example, rock melons, honeydew, and specialty melons, they are harvested, transported to a packing house where they are pre-cooled, washed, and sanitized before shipping to the market. But majority of the watermelons, they are picked in the field and packed in the field and directly shipped to the market. There are a few examples where watermelons are also washed and sanitized, but they're just few in number. So melons, like any other horticulture produce, are grown in a complex ecosystem where a lot of environmental and geographical factors are interacting with each other. So it's critical for growers to understand the sources and potential routes of contamination of melons. I'm just going to give you the overview of these risk factors. The most important thing is the animal feces, which is generally the source of microbial contamination. So we advise growers to do risk assessments for the presence of wildlife surrounding their property, and also look for livestock operations such as cattle feedlots, poultry, piggery, as the runoff from these livestock operations can contaminate the irrigation water upstream, and sometimes the weather events such as flooding, runoff, or even dust storms can bring the contaminants from neighboring properties to the melon fields. There are a number of agronomic practices which can be adopted to minimize the food safety risks. So I'm going to talk about a few. We strongly recommend that raw animal manures must not be used in melon production fields, as raw animal manure can contain foodborne bacterial pathogens and even viruses, which can survive in soils for weeks and even months, depending on the soil and climatic conditions. So no use of raw animal manures in melon production systems. Plastic mulching is a common practice. It also reduces the ground contact of melons with the soil and minimizes the chances of contamination. Further, drip irrigation is known to reduce the microbial food safety hazards in case the irrigation water is contaminated. So it should be a preferred method of irrigation over furrows or overhead sprinklers. Melon growers use different water sources for irrigation, and most of these water sources are surface water, rivers, dams, and creeks. So we recommend that the microbiological quality of irrigation water must be monitored regularly for the food safety certification and otherwise. If there's a weather event such as flooding or big dust storm, or if you notice some other unforeseen event, this irrigation water quality should be checked regularly. As I mentioned before, the dust storms are a major issue in some of the melon growing regions. And we recommend to use the windbreaks and interrow crops to manage dust storms. So dust storms have potential to bring pathogens over a few kilometers, and we have seen some incidents that the microbial load on the fruit increases after the dust storm events. So the washing and sanitization practices may not become adequate for fruits like rock melons to minimize the microbial load on the fruit. So we also recommend that before picking the fruit, farm managers should do a thorough inspection of the fields and also train the staff in noticing the intrusion of domestic animals or even in wildlife. So these inspections are useful in locating any animal intrusions or the animal feces or sighting of bird dropping in a packing house. So we recommend that inspections are important to prevent any food safety failure on farm. Harvest machinery is one of the could be one of the source of microbial contamination. So the conveyor belts on the harvest machinery used for harvesting melons could become a source of contamination. So we recommend cleaning and sanitization of the harvest machinery on a regular basis. Workers' hygiene and health is important. So as part of the various food safety certification programs, growers are supposed to provide toilets and hand washing facilities in the field and pack house. They're very important, and especially in the COVID-19 era, we have to make sure that workers' health and safety is monitored from workforce point of view. Until now, I have talked about various food safety hazards and how to manage them broadly at pre-harvest level and harvest level. So now I'll be talking more about the post-harvest stages of melon handling. In case of watermelons, the industry practice is to harvest the melons manually and then clean and wipe in the field, and then pack them in the bulk bins for shipping. We did a lot of experiments in the lab and found that cleaning and wiping practice could potentially spread the contaminants from one fruit to others. So our research shows that using cloths and the rags, they should be good quality, they should be clean, and they should be frequently changed. But we have also found a difference in the potential of rags in transferring the pathogen. For example, dry rags or cloths, they minimize the cross-contamination risk compared to with damp or wet rags or cloths. So we recommend that these rags and cloths could be a potential source of cross-contamination, so growers should keep an eye on them. Moving on to the post-harvest handling of rock melons, honeydew melons, they are generally picked in the field in large plastic field crates, bins. And we have found that these harvest bins can also carry contamination and pass on to the fruits. So we have recommended in our best practice guide that they have to be cleaned and sanitized after each use or before each use. Once fruit is harvested and transported to the pack house, we recommend that rock melons and honeydew melons, they should be pre-cooled to less than 10 degrees Celsius core temperature before washing. Fruits such as rock melons, they are porous. So if the fruit is warm, there is a risk of infiltration of wash water inside the fruit. So if there's any pathogen present on the skin, it can potentially go inside the fruit. So to minimize the risk of infiltration of pathogen, we strongly recommend that these fruits should be pre-cooled. If growers do not have dedicated forced pre-cooling facilities, we recommend the storage of rock melons and honeydew melons overnight in a cool room at 5 degrees Celsius before they are washed and sanitized on the next day. Post-harvest wash water is an important element in melon food safety. So the quality of wash water is very important. If wash water is contaminated, it can spread the contamination on a large scale and causing foodborne illness outbreaks. So we recommend that only drinking quality water should be used for washing the fruit, as well as cleaning and sanitizing the fruit contact surfaces such as conveyor belts and packing tables. So this post-harvest wash water must contain a sanitizer at the recommended concentration. We know that melon packers generally use surface water and they don't have access to groundwater supplies. So investment in water filtration and treatment systems is worth considering the risks associated with the post-harvest wash water. So once fruit are pre-cooled, they're dumped onto the packing line for further washing and sanitization. So here, some growers have dry dumping systems. So the fruit is dumped onto a conveyor belt, while a few growers still have wet dumping system. So we recommend dry dumping over wet dumping because when you dump fruit in a large volume tank, there's a major risk of cross contamination. And the maintaining the appropriate concentration of sanitizer in such a large volume tanks is also challenging. So we have a fact sheet on dump tank management. It's part of our melon food safety toolbox, where we have illustrated the critical control parameters in a dump tank management. Another important aspect of post-harvest washing is that we recommend single-use wash water. Basically, you run wash water to waste. So we don't recommend recirculation of wash water. If you are meeting the sustainability agenda of horticulture industries, we recommend that you filter and treat the water to drinking quality standard before you reuse it. As I said before, that water must contain a sanitizer. So there are two options. Either we add sanitizer to water manually or we use an automated system. So melon industry in recent years have moved towards automation of their sanitizer injection system because it eliminates the human error and it also helps to maintain the concentration of sanitizer consistently. See, automated systems, they also allow data logging, where if there's a need, we can go back to these systems and retrieve data to look at the wash water, sanitizer concentrations, and other conditions. So once you have automated systems for sanitizer injection, we recommend that you should have digital tools for monitoring the precision and accuracy of your automated system. The use of test strips, which has been very common in the industry previously, we don't encourage it as the readings could vary from one operator to another. Similar to dump tank management, we have a fact sheet on food washing and sanitizer where we have listed all the critical control parameters that a packer must look, and these are all parts of a puzzle where you need to have the sanitizer concentration right, the contact time right, and also monitor the temperature of the fruit as well as the wash water. So in terms of sanitizers, there are a number of options available, but the melon industry uses chlorine and paracetic acid as two most commonly used sanitizers. So in case of sanitizer, for example, for chlorine, we recommend that there should be minimum 100 parts per million of chlorine in the wash water, and along with the contact time of 2 minutes. So to achieve a good sanitization efficacy, it's not only the concentration of the sanitizer, it's the contact time, how long the fruit stays in contact with wash water. So in case of chlorine, other than concentration and contact time, pH is critical. Similarly, with paracetic acid, 80 parts per million is the minimum recommended concentration with a contact time of at least 2 minutes. Just to have a bit of deep insight into chlorine's basic chemistry, it's a bit hard to manage sanitizer. So one has to understand that when you add chlorine to wash water, it increases the pH, whether you use sodium hypochlorite or calcium hypochlorite. So management of chlorine is important. As you can see in this illustration, that chlorine is present in two forms. One is active free chlorine, present as hypochlorous acid, and the other form is hypochlorite. So we want more of active free chlorine in wash water. So you can see in the illustration that as the pH goes up beyond 7, 8, and 9, the proportion of active free chlorine decreases. So it's very important that we adjust the pH of wash water once we add chlorine to that. So as part of these melon food safety R&D projects, we have produced melon food safety resources, which are available at our website that you can download. So for example, you can see the sanitizer efficacy. As I mentioned before, you have to have the control over the concentration, contact time, pH, temperature, and organic load. For more detailed information, I refer you to these melon food safety resources. Another important aspect in melon food safety is the backhouse environment control. So a melon packer must understand the potential hotspots where cross-contamination can occur in melons. So I have just listed these cross-contamination hotspots, for example, harvest bins, dump tanks, and brushes and conveyor belts. So if you would like to manage melon food safety, you have to understand these hotspots and maintain the backhouse environment in such a way so that these environmental pathogens such as Listeria monocytogenes, they don't enter into your facility and become residents there. As part of our detective control for melon food safety, in this project, we have been running melon food safety surveillance. So this is the scorecard for last 1 year. We tested melon samples for 3 target pathogens, Salmonella species, Listeria monocytogenes, and then pathogenic strain of E. coli 015787. So our sampling procedure is quite comprehensive. So we collect samples from growers, packers, wholesalers, and retailers, including whole melons as well as cut melons. And these samples represent a wide range of growers from all over Australia. So in the last 1 year, we collected around 893 samples, in which we had around 500 samples of waters and then watermelon, and then 348 samples of rock melon and specialty melons, and a few samples from the environment. So in total, we conducted 2,679 tests. And the good part is that the industry is doing very well, and we only found one test positive out of 2,679. As part of our corrective controls, uh, traceability is important for the industry. So we want industry to follow best practice in traceability too, where we are expecting the industry to label each fruit so that there's end-to-end traceability. And if there's a need, the product can be recalled without affecting the whole industry. So that's really important. You can see in the picture, a grower from Queensland is using this blockchain-based traceability solution where each watermelon is labeled, and the consumer can also scan the label and look at the farm and probably give the feedback to the grower. So in our Safe Melons program, we have a food safety help desk where we address technical inquiries relating to melon food safety. So growers or any other person from the melon supply chain can contact us through email or phone, and we are happy to answer their technical questions on food safety. So finally, I would like to conclude my presentation that key to managing melon food safety is the combination of these different types of control measures which should be in place, and the fundamental is the best practice in applying these preventative controls. I would like to acknowledge Hort Innovation for funding and support from Melon Australia. And this webinar is delivered through Northern Territory Department of Prime Industries. And I have a great project team and project reference group to guide us on the project. Thank you very much for listening to my webinar. I'm happy to take questions.